Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Steve Mezio. I'm the Associate Dean in the Lubin School of Business. I also am the Executive Director for a Lubin Center. It's called the Center for Sustainable Business. And I recognize some of your names. I'm also a professor of accounting at Pace University. Welcome to the Lubin's Roundtable series. The Roundtable series is really designed to help you engage with some of our successful alumni. And today we are absolutely thrilled to introduce our guest speaker, Mr. Gunther Bright. Mr. Bright is a university alum. He received his undergraduate degree in economics from Lubin. Currently, he has an incredibly impressive role at an incredibly impressive company. Mr. Bright serves as the Executive Vice President and General Manager of the global and US large enterprises at American Express. As many of you may know, American Express is quite a prestigious international organization. Among its many, many accolades, it's ranked 67th in the Fortune 500, 14th in Fortune's most admired companies, and it's ranked 9th as Fortune's 100 best companies to work for. It's large, for example, nearly 200 billion in assets. In his role as Executive VP and General Manager of global and US large enterprises, Mr. Bright is responsible for one of the largest strategic business units at American Express, and has an extensive and impressive track record, including business transformation, growth strategies. And he's really recognized throughout the organization and throughout the industry, in fact, as a strategic thought leader and a trusted partner, consistently delivering value. And as you probably hear in many of our courses, value propositions and delivering value, that's really at the foundation of all of our institutional organizations today. In spite of this busy schedule, Mr. Bright is also extensively engaged in community service. And again, that's another important part of the Lubin sort of culture and mission. For example, he's currently executive committee member for Junior Achievement, board of directors, vice chair and executive committee member of the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater, member of the Board of Trustees and executive leadership of the Executive Leadership Council, and he's actively involved in supporting student development and student organizations. Mr. Bright, we are privileged to have you. Welcome to our Roundtable series. I'd like to turn it over to you. We would look forward to hearing your story, your professional story, and I'll turn it over to you now. Welcome.
Well, thank you so much for that warm introduction, Steve. I really appreciate it. And welcome to all of you who have decided to invest the time for this series. It's a privilege and honor for me to come back as an alum to Pace, where I got a start. And what I'll do is give you just a quick background and some context of why I'm appreciative of the catalyst that was Pace many years ago. And I'm going to say it, I went back and forth. Should I really tell you that it's been north of 30 years? I'm going to do that. And I want no one to judge me on the call. But it's been a long time since I've been with Pace. But one of the things that attracted me to Pace, where I grew up in Queens, was how can I grew up in Queens. My dad had a blue collar job. My mom was, for the most part, a stay-at-home mom, and then later on did nursing, became a nurse. And I had to figure out a way to pay my way through school because they couldn't afford it. And at the same time, obviously, work and get whatever loans I had. And looked at what would be a great environment where at the time, I was definitely not even in the categorization of an overachiever. I was really trying to get by. Pace set up a program, was welcoming, and allowed me to feel comfortable and like I belonged. We talk about inclusion these days all the time, but before it was cliche to talk about inclusion, Pace made me feel comfortable because there were people in the school who looked like me, who came from similar backgrounds that I did. Some were first generation coming into the States, but there was just this great aggregation of diversities of all types. I happen to have befriended someone who actually reached out to me not long ago, who actually was much more affluent. And he was in different studies in accounting. So is this just this range of people? And in an institution, academic institution, one of the things that's, to me, the secret sauce and really important is, how do you get people together and have the opportunity to have and share different perspectives, come with different paradigms? And PACE allowed me to do that while getting the education, also being relatively flexible with my calendar. I did for some semesters, I did night studies. Others I did day, and then switched when I was working at night. Others some hybrid, and so it was really accommodating. And without that accommodation and what I would consider investment in me and the foresight, I wouldn't have been able to definitely have the introduction that Steve gave. So my journey was great. One of the things was interesting to me as I reflected is probably unlike you all, I had literally limited clue onto what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I think Steve talked about, I graduated economics, but I started out with accounting and then said, I know I want to do something in business because I had been exposed to some successful business people. And I said, wow, I want to do that. And again, in the neighborhood I grew up in, I didn't have a lot of role models who would like that. And again, PACE gave me the opportunity to interact with people, business people, but politicians and entrepreneurs and others where I did not and would not have had that exposure. So that's really important. And we'll talk about, hopefully we'll have some Q&A and talk about the journey, but I left PACE and started out at American Express, actually in accounting, and moved through the organization in finance and in planning and in commercial services and operations in our consumer business. So that's, the cards that all of running on co-brands, running the merchant business. And so a lot of opportunities that sometimes it's important to reflect, how did this all start? And, second to my parents and their support and encouragement and love, I would say, boy, the launch pad was me saying, I'm going to be committed to try to get this, my academics in order, thereby increasing the probability of me landing, a decent job. I didn't know what kind of job exactly I wanted. Wasn't focused on the pay at that point. I just wanted a job that was stable and can give me the opportunity based on whatever the meritocracy is there to succeed. And so, here I am. What I would ask, maybe for Lana, should we take questions? And by the way, what I would ask all of you to do, I'm sure when there's a big group like this, some people are going to be reticent, totally respect that. But I want some of you who want to step up and ask me any questions, direct me in any way. This is actually your time that you've made the decision in all of the things that you're doing to invest. I want to make it productive and meaningful for you. So any questions you have now or during this next hour, please don't be hesitant to just speak up. And I think you can raise your hand, or you could just maybe start asking the question or giving comments.
Gunther, someone did actually send me a question when they registered. So let's start with that one.
Right.
The question is, what do you think sets American Express apart from other payment service companies? What do you think was the most influential in obtaining your current position?
That's a great question. So what sets us apart is, I would say, a couple things. One, our people. We have incredible people who are committed to ensuring that the company is successful, that their colleagues and peers are successful. That's where I'll start. And it's just this culture that we have. The next one would be innovation. We have been at the forefront of innovation. It's kind of counterintuitive. The company's been around 175 years, and I talk about innovation. So we started out in Stagecoach. We were, for those of you who don't know, we were connected and cousins of Wells Fargo way back when. And we went through different consolidations when it used to be something called like the financial supermarket and conglomerate, and we did that. But what has always been our North Star is innovation, making sure that we innovate to what end, and to the end is to make sure there's a differentiated experience for our customers. And so whether you are thinking about what now is ubiquitous, which is rewards and points and loyalty, that started with American Express. Whether you think about now lounges are starting to pop up, that was American Express. Whether you think about the focus on travel, cash back, there's a number of things that American Express originated with American Express. And that is, you say, what the question is, what differentiates us vis-a-vis others in the payments area? It's interesting. You should kind of look and do the research. Whether you are talking about Visa, where the CEO is a former American Express person, whether you're talking about MasterCard, where the number 2 is there, whether you're talking about JP Morgan, where Gordon Smith, number 2 after Jamie Dimon, is there. And I can keep on going. Fiserv. These are all companies that have alum that are American Express, and that's not by PayPal. Dan Schulman, who's the CEO of PayPal, is an American Express alum. And I can continue to go on. So what differentiates us is we really focus on, again, that culture, but developing people, making sure that they have the opportunity to navigate this big organization, because we believe that if you have more differentiated experiences, more diverse experiences across the company, you are much more thoughtful. Your solutions are better. The ideation that goes on in the room is better. So I started by telling you that I've been across our businesses and just all of the business units from a P&L perspective, but also from some of the functional groups, planning and operations and accounting, finance. And that to me is what makes one of the things that's a differentiator for one in their career, whether you're at American Express or anywhere else. I would encourage you all to be, first, do your job really right. I always tell people, do your core job really well before you start getting distracted, but do that really well. And then look for those opportunities where you can learn. So be curious. I'm curious. I love being around individuals who are curious and not focused in a narrow way about either their scope of their life experience, scope academically, scope professionally, because the more you can do that and create, hopefully, this 360 or panoramic view of things and really understand perspectives that others would have. I think the more you do that, the more your end result and output will be better. I think the more as you become leaders of an organization or a team, you think about what are the right questions, and you can really go through the process of prioritizing things and differentiating what are those things that are going to be most impactful, what are those things that are not. So I think that all of that really makes a difference in terms of differentiating American Express relative to other payments, and really the fact that we focus on development of people so they can have range is what I would call it, and be just broad in their thinking, that then leads to the momentum for the company. One thing I would add when you think about innovation, which is real, we started back in 2020, the beginning January and February American Express, and we did this whole what we call as a refresh of products and services, and they were geared towards a travel. A lot of our business legacy on the consumer side is the benefits that you get for traveling. And so you think about you were able to get, if you're a traveler, whether it's business or consumer, you get into a lounge, a Delta lounge, a JetBlue, whatever the lounge, you get into a lot of lounges. You can get rewards to upgrade in hotels or buy your hotel rooms or rental cars, get on airlines, all of that thing. We invested literally about $1 billion in January to roll that out. And then the global pandemic happened. Well, guess what? Not a lot of people were on planes. Not a lot of people were renting cars. Not a lot of people were at hotels. So we had to quickly pivot and say, what are those things that would be relevant to our cardholders? Because if we don't have relevance, they'll attrite, they'll leave us. And so we then introduced things like, we had a big relationship with Uber, but again, no one was taking an Uber car. So we said, let's do Uber Eats. Let's go do partnerships with DoorDash. Let's go do partnerships with all of those kind of platforms for where you can order. Let's people we see are watching, doing a lot of streaming. So let's form all these partnerships with Hulu and Netflix, and I can go on. And by the way, we want to make this a seamless experience. So when Eliana goes out and uses her streaming, what we can do is she doesn't have to click on anything. We'll just send her a credit, a monthly credit for her streaming services. When she's ordering for Uber Eats, we'll delight and surprise her and say, based on that order, you're getting $25 credit this month. So we really pivoted, and that was really important. And I think when you think about innovation, that's one of the things that we're known for: quick, agile innovation.
Actually, if you don't mind, I have a question. How would you describe, with the industry boundaries now sort of blurring, and it's hard to even define what an industry is, as you know, Gunther. How would you define American Express today, as opposed to maybe when you started?
Yeah. So before, when I started, I would say we were and we went through some morphing. We were a card company. We were a service company, which still remains integral to what we do. But now we are much more of an experience lifestyle company that is agnostic in how you pay. A lot of you may not even have cards, right? You use your phone and app and whatever, use some wrist device. So we have moved. We used to be fixated on the form, but we want everyone to have that physical piece of, at the time, plastic. But now we're really about how do we facilitate payments, and doing so, making sure that we're enriching your life experience when you're doing whatever you're doing. It could be restaurants, it could be all of the things that you think about, which is very different than transactional, because what we really want to do is have a relationship with you. Versus, you go, and whether it's an ATM or you go to the bank, and think about that. The amount of people who literally go into a bank and visit a teller, and if you all don't know what a teller is, I'll describe it to you at some point on this. But people who literally used to have that experience, and that was core to them attracting you for a bank. That doesn't happen anymore. So we had competitors that we would consider before traditional. It's the city of the JP Morgan and MasterCard and Visa. Now, our competitors are across the spectrum. It could be, we have a partnership with PayPal. They're what we call frenemies, right? They're trying to do things with Apple, big customers of mine, Apple and Microsoft, Amazon. These are each of them we have partnerships with, like literally have partnerships with them. And, but they are trying to, what I would say from a business perspective, commercial perspective, do bad things to us because they want to insert themselves in this, Facebook, AKA now Meta. They're trying to do the same thing. So the competitive landscape continues to change, back to why I think it's so crucial that you remain in your journey incredibly curious and have this insatiable appetite to learn again, not just in the space, the discipline that you have, but figure out to the left, to the right, front and back, what your competitors, what your friends and will be competitors are doing in their particular space. And that's not really contained to business. I believe I'm a pretty big reader of all kinds of stuff. And I think whether it's politics, history, religion, all this stuff, I like to read just so I understand. And what I try to do, people think I'm sometimes schizophrenic, is especially my family when they're here. I turn on all kinds of cable channels, not just one that's going to feed into whatever my paradigm is. I read books that I know I'm going to get worked up and have to go for a walk after I finish some of it, but it's important to understand.
Yeah, it is.
I think you should. I would encourage you to do that as you broaden your horizon.
Other questions from the audience?
Just out of curiosity, you just mentioned some books. Do you have any that you recommend for our students?
Oh, books. So two things. Let me answer the question and then tell you why I'm paused a little bit. So there's The Power of Graceful Leadership. I'm reading now. Someone suggested that to me about a month and a half ago, and it's all about. I'll describe it the way they describe it. It would normally not describe it this way because it makes me uncomfortable. It's like finding your true self, right? And being able to bring, which is really important and relevant, your true self to business and everyone. I'm looking at the screen, and so now you're, figuratively speaking, you're at school. And so you bring your kind of school self, and then you have this home self. And then when you go to work, you're this work self. That is dilutive. And so I was giving some remarks to someone, and she was saying, like, you should read this because it really is about how can you lead and bring all of yourself. The author happens to be a woman, and so she's going through some examples about as a parent and as a wife and as all this stuff. And so it's just important, and it not only helps you see yourself and be able to navigate. And to me, if you bring your whole self, you're optimizing your output, but it also allows you to see others in a different perspective. I can remember when I started, at American Express, great company, it was terrific, but I was like, oh, when I go through the doors, I have to be this guy. I can't be that guy. I have to be someone else. And that is always going to be, always, not sometimes, it's always suboptimal, because you were then holding back. And so that's what I say. So there's so many books on leadership over the years that, I've read. I'm big into how do you do damage control, and I get that bill. Some of the assignments I've been given, actually the majority, especially last 10, 12 years, have been assignments where things are messy and hairy and it needs a turnaround. So Steve has described the job I'm in, this global and large enterprises, and it is all of the companies who use our corporate products. So they use corporate cards, they use corporate payments, they use corporate expense management, they use a whole bunch of the suite of corporate products we have. And American Express has about 65% deep relationship with the Fortune 500. So these are all these big companies. And so that's a big revenue stream. Another challenge of the pandemic is all of those services and products, et cetera, from the corporate card to expense, people were staying home. So to give you context, and this is nothing out of school, from 2019 to 2020, so 1 year really wasn't 1 year, it was like 5 months difference. The P&L I'm responsible for lost $1 billion in income. So if you think you go from 5 months before making $1 billion more to 5 months after $1 billion less, that's kind of a crisis. That's a big problem. And so I've gotten in, asked to take on different assignments like that. So I'm always like, how did people do like these remarkable recoveries? What do they think about? How do they lead and build a team, which is really important? And how do they prioritize when it's all of these things to do? How do you stabilize things? So that's what I would say. And I think that you can read, I wouldn't say all books are good, but it's sometimes tough if you could start reading something that, again, it's different perspective. You may not agree, you may agree, but at least you get a different point of view, which I think is always additive. So that's what I would say.
I have to say, Gunther, I really endorse this idea of sort of diversity in reading, diversity in perspectives. I couldn't agree more. I'm reading a book right now. It's called Creators, and it really just gives vignettes of some of the most, incredibly innovative people, but really transcends everywhere from Beethoven to Picasso to Disney to, who are creative in their own space or innovative in their own space. And although I don't know anything about any of their skill sets, it's been really interesting. I haven't got through the whole thing yet, but it's really been interesting to your point about seeing how the mindset and in fact, many circumstances, for example, damage control or key customer or key account management, really some of the issues and skills and leadership capabilities transcend industry situations and all. I think that's what you were saying, but that's what I get out of books like that. Yeah, I think it's really instructive and gives you different perspectives.
That's right. And it's, it's interesting because of all that was happening in the last year and a half. I've been on a number of panels of diversity and inclusion and just perspective. And one of the things I said, and it's really somewhat analogous to just reading different books and getting different points of view, is that this is not a judgmental, it's not right, wrong, it's just, it is what it is. We, and that's an inclusive we, if left to our own devices, we default to being incredibly tribal, right? Not that you don't like these other people, you just like more comfortable with whomever you hang out with. It's just what it is, right? It's not a bad thing. It's not necessarily. And so what then that just kind of feeds on either the views that we have that are probably not really formed about our tribe or other tribes without really kind of probing and understanding and getting back to perspectives. And I think what Steve calls is right. With reading those books, you go, I have no interest in fill in the blank necessarily, but can I learn from someone who is a master in her or his space, who've done some things that are transformative? I think we all can benefit a little bit. And again, back to opening up that aperture of ideas is, pretty cool, in my humble opinion.
I actually think it feeds innovation as well at the end of the day, too. It opens up your different perspectives. Questions from anyone?
I believe we had a question from Nicole.
Great.
What other jobs did you have that you liked besides American Express?
That's interesting. So I will tell you, I'm a career American Express person. Now, before I got to American Express, I told you that I was kind of working my way through school. I was in public sector, and that was, I wouldn't say I liked it. That's probably would not be accurate. What I will say is I learned about human nature more. I learned about the differerences, and it was just in the 5 boroughs, and in the 5 boroughs, you can imagine we have the richest people on the planet, and you have some of the poorest, believe it or not, in the richest country in the world. So I just learned some of that. I learned and had an appreciation for the things that people went through that you kind of don't notice or they're invisible. So it wasn't I liked that job that I had for about 5 years. I learned a lot about human nature. I learned about resiliency when I would see some children in certain circumstances that I how could they ever smile, or people just in situations. And so that was probably the biggest learning from a human, just human nature and mankind perspective. But then I moved from there to a different kind of role, which is, American Express. So that's what I would say. But, even though I've been within American Express, American Express for so long, American Express has gone through a metamorphosis, right? When I first started, there were few people of color and there were few women of any color, right? It's just, unless I'm talking about executive assistants, that's just the reality. I would look at the people who were the role models and, they were just different. And so that you go through that metamorphosis and learn how do you, and this back to, it's going to keep on coming to this, how do you learn to get comfortable with dealing with different people? That was one of those things that, boy, was that a development need. I was like, oh, how do I speak to these people? And, frankly, how do I talk to, I'll say Gary, because I see Gary, when I'm at the kind of a junior person at American Express, he's a senior, he's a VP or SVP, whatever he is. And he's talking about spring break and going to Vail and with the family for skiing. And he's talking about going to his second home somewhere. And I'm like, how do I relate to Gary? And so it's just important to relate to different people. So I think, again, all experiences may not be enjoyable, but what I try to do is find what can I extract from that experience.
Gunther, I'm sure everyone here is going to be graduating soon or at some point in the near future. And if you think about, what advice might you give? You mentioned earlier when you first walked into American Express as a newly graduated student. And I can remember when I first walked into my firm as a newly graduated student, I was incredibly intimidated and very nervous. Right. What advice might you, for all the reasons you just described, by the way, but what advice might you give this group?
Yeah, so a couple of things. Even before you get there, what I would say is do something you're passionate about. That's like really important. People talk about what drives success. Liking, enjoying what you do and being passionate about it already takes you ahead of the game. And I think that that's really important. And now, especially in this environment, for those of you graduating, you have more choices than a lot who came before you in terms of optionality. So I would leverage that. The next thing it would be learn your job, listen, receive, and be a sponge. Sometimes it's, people are quick to make suggestions and say things should be this way or that way. I would first figure out where the pantry is, figuratively speaking. Start making suggestions about the operating model. But I think building relationships are really, really important. So it's understanding the culture. Every company has cultures. I interview from different companies and a lot of companies. And sometimes I go, this will fit. And other times I say to them, I don't think you're going to do well at American Express. So my pause is, will you do well with American Express? Because where you come from and the examples you gave me, that was all me. It was, kind of Game of Thrones-ish. That's not how we do it at American Express. It works brilliantly for that company. And you should know, there was a GE many years ago, I'm sure Steve knows, it was a Darwinistic environment. You know what? Here, chop you if you didn't do these things. By the way, GE was one of the most incredibly successful companies in the world. That's just not a good culture to migrate from GE at the time to American Express. So you have to figure out what culture works for you as well and understand that. And I think those are the things you should start it.
It's interesting that you say that. I've been I'm older, so I've been a long time customer of a customer of American Express on the retail side, and dealt with it a little bit on the business side. in some of the firms and service. You mentioned a lot of the innovation and creativity and culture, but service, really anecdotally, I'm just one person, but consistent service over all the changes that American Express has been through. The customer service angle really doesn't seem to skip a beat, and that. Tell us a little bit about that. I mean, you have something to do with that in your tenure there.
Yeah, you know what I would say is that we be self-aware, and so the first thing is we know we don't make anything, right? If you're a man, if Caterpillar makes stuff, people make stuff. What we have, and people have a lot of options. What we know as a differentiator is service. Like, how do I make this person feel, this customer feel appreciated, recognized, let them know that we have, member sense. The membership of American Express is different. And people remember not when they're just swiping the card, whether it's American Express, Visa, MasterCard. They remember, wow, when I was stranded, when I was stuck, when someone in my family got sick. Right, there we go. American Express did it. And by the way, pre-pandemic, as many, believe it or not, in many countries around the world, people would call American Express, and/or we used to have all these locations around the world, go to an American Express office before they went to an embassy. That is, we know that our brand represents a huge portion of our market cap. So we are incredibly protective of that and do it right. One example I'll use again is pandemic. We had, at the time in the US, 40,000 customer service professionals, the people who you call for American Express, and they pick up the phone and you travel and do all the things. Obviously, everyone, they were in centers. Everyone had to go home. So within a 2-week period, we took the 40,000 people all across the country in, urban areas and suburban areas, in tertiary areas, because they come from everywhere, and moved them home, set them up with computers, and people were blown away that I can't believe I can get through to American Express and I'm waiting for 8 hours, no exaggeration, to get through to something else to ask, like, what do I do? And I had this trip that I was going to plan, but the airline canceled and I can't get to them. What do I do? That, to me, we still get feedback on, wow, you guys made a remarkable recovery and pivot. And that's because it's really important to us. We know that if you leave us, that's our relationship in terms of from the consumer side. Whereas maybe a bank says, well, I have my relationship with you on your, your mortgage or your car loan or your saving. It's all this other stuff. This is really core. So we're again incredibly protective of it, and that's how I think about keeping that alive and thriving as a differentiator.
Or Angela, do you want to ask your question, Angela?
Yes, I would. Hi, my name
Hello.
is Angela Gardner, and I'm actually going to be joining American Express in January. So I'm super excited to join this roundtable.
Welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited to be one of your colleagues, and I agree. I love the diversity there. That's one of the reasons, not just like you said, as far as like race and sex and all that different stuff, but also just in the way of people's like backgrounds as far as professionally. But I wanted to know, what do you think is the most important part, or I guess attributes that you have that have gotten you to your position now, or like advice you would have for me?
So one, I stick to curiosity. 2, authenticity. I think that's really important because people then, and I'll actually take it kind of. So the curiosity we spoke about, the authenticity is important because people know when you're like kind of pull one over them, and they know if you're empathetic or not. They know if you care or not. I mean, think about how many times, Angela, someone said to you, "Hey, Angela, how was your weekend?" "Oh, so let's start on this little project." You go, "You didn't really want to know how my weekend was," right? Or, "Angela, I hope you're better. So let's move on." You really have to be authentic. I think that's really important. It sounds so basic, but treat people the way you want to be treated. It's kind of, just a fact. And people, what I've realized throughout my career is that I get so much support and have gotten so much support that has contributed to the things I've been able to do from people who we consider lower level than I was, as I did with the sponsorship and advocacy that I got from others. So I think that that's really important. And last is I'm competitive and want to win all the time, but I'm always focused on winning the right way. And so what I think in this for you, Angela, and everyone else, I'm a believer that you build a brand. So we only think about companies building brands. I think you build your personal brand. And what is an interesting phenomenon? Either you are driving that narrative or it's being driven for you. So what, and my little test is, and I do this from kind of business planning, at the end of the year, what is it that I want to accomplish and what are my milestones to get there? I think you can convert that into a brand management thing. Like, what do I want authentically? People, when they think about Angela, to think about whether it's my work ethic, whether it's my collaboration, whether it's the things I've done, who I am. I think that is really an important attribute to have, kind of self-awareness and planfulness and intentionality. And that will, whether it's at American Express or anywhere else, get you far. And I'll stop there with the attributes on that, Angela, because that's enough for you to do for the next year. Just do those things. You'll be just fine.
Thank you so much. I'll connect with you on LinkedIn. I appreciate that.
Ready.
Let's move on to the next student.
Yes, hello. I'd like to ask a question about your first position at the American Express, like the entry level. What was your responsibilities? And if you remember, and if it's not a secret, what was your salary then?
Oh, wow. So my first job was an analyst it was an accountant, a junior accountant. And this is before we had everything that was digital. We did this stuff. And so we closed the books, right? Accounting, we closed the books, but it was all a paper exercise. So we had a huge, American Express had and has a huge marketing budget. So my responsibility was was called the Advertising Control Unit. And it was to make sure all of those invoices that we received from Ogilvy and Mather and all the big companies were there. They were reconciled. They were the right bills, and they had to be paid on time, kind of at a high level. That was the job. So it was kind of receiving and payables. Think about that. At the time, I made a whopping, but someone asked about my favorite job. Before this, I had made more than I'm about to give you. But back to what is your passion? What do you want to do? Sometimes you have to make trade-offs. So my first job, I was a terrible negotiator. You should never do this, people. I went to, at the time, Human Resources, and I remember this, asked me, so what do you expect to make? And I said, $25,000. And she said, okay, then. And I knew then, oh, wow, I think I messed that up. That was way too easy. So that was my first job, and that was the salary I made. But that was an investment, right? It was like I had to really believe that I'm going to make it up over time, and that's what you all have to believe when you go somewhere. That and it's not only about the money, just to be clear. It's about fulfillment. Again, back to that passion. What are you passionate in what you want to do? I've over the years, just recently, people who have left American Express to go somewhere else because, Gunther, you don't understand, I'm going to get a 25% increase. This happened to someone in my organization, not direct reports. And last month, he's pleading, can he come back to American Express? Because one, yes, he's making more money, but the culture is not the same. He's not, being fulfilled. So money is obviously important, but I know it's easy for me to say it is not the most important thing for the long term. Thanks for the question.
I always feel like money follows quality and trust and commitment, and you
That's
do
right.
the right thing and work hard and add value, and money usually follows. I know that sounds
right.
It sounds a little bit pie in the sky, but it tends to work out that way.
It does.
We have a question from Miss Afori.
Hi. So my
Oh,
question is, what would you say is like your biggest accomplishment or one of your biggest accomplishments, whether it be in your personal life or career wise?
mm. So wow, that's a galactic question. Why are you gonna give me that big of a question? I love it. I love it. So best accomplishment is I have two sons, and they've, knock on wood, so far they've grown up to be, good young men. They're 20 and 21, so I feel really, really great about that. And they're respectful and good human beings and care about other people, which was one of the most important things for me. Not to be, some anyway. I like that they are good, grounded individuals. That's the first thing. Professionally, it's really, I've had a couple of things. Remember, I said I have been fortunate enough to be asked by different people in this last assignment. Our CEO, Steve Square, asked me to do a couple of things and have, pulled it and made a difference to the company, whether it's how we did the separation of Costco when we decided to leave them, how we had to go. I represented the company 4 years ago with the Department of Justice when some other companies were bringing a lawsuit against American Express that would have cost the company about $6+ billion, and we won the case. We collectively won the case. Whether it's turning this around, so those are the things from a business. But I will tell you, at this juncture, it is. I get excited. It's probably been this way for 10 years. I get excited, happy, giddy that I'm able to look around the company and see so many people that have had the opportunity to impact positively in their career, help them when they were having problems with their family and raising kids and transfer. So I just delight on that to brand, right? I think it was someone said, Angela, one of the brand elements I have is that, boy, he develops and has people grow and thrive in this company. That's like a big, 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 big deal to me that I get. Because here's the deal. No one's going to really remember that, oh, wow, he crushed the numbers on his P&L. No one's going to do it. That's good for the year and helps you with a rating. But what they will remember is things like, wow, when I was this young analyst coming up, or when I was trying to become a director or VP or SVP, whatever it is that you're trying to become, he took the time to help me navigate through. And I think that's important. And it's a function of all of the people who had an impact in my life. And I tell people back to diversity. I tell people it's kind of interesting, African-American guy, the three most impactful people in my life at American Express literally was an Irish guy, a German guy, and an Italian guy. Right now, the good news that they all came from the boroughs, so maybe we had that in common. But that's, so you just have to look for those opportunities, and they made a difference in my life. Again, when I thought I couldn't do some of these jobs, one example is Ed Gilligan, who passed away. I had 4 people literally reporting to me. And he gave me this operations responsibility where I went from 4 people to 1,000 people. And I said, Ed, don't give me this job. I'm gonna mess it up. I cannot do it. Do not do it. And he was like, you can do this. I believe in you. And, he did that. But those kinds of pivotal moments really make a difference. So that's what I would say. So give back. Once you all are gonna make it and do well, whatever your ambitions are at Pace University, what I would say is when you make it, because that's a when, not if, make sure you give back.
Does anyone have any questions? Please unmute yourself or raise your hand and we will call on you.
I have a question actually. So you talked about your biggest successes, and I know that, as human beings, it's pretty much impossible for us to fail. So do you have any advice on how to fail and, how to find the lesson, I guess, at the end of it and through that based on your experience?
Yes, great. I would reframe the question. It's actually not hard to fail. We just have a hard time admitting we failed. I failed a lot of times, right? But I think it's back to self-awareness, Pablo, and being being honest and being not tough on yourself. You have to get the balance, but how do you, again, I start out, what do I want to accomplish? I said, right, I do that every year and I go through the plans. I do strategic planning process just from a professional perspective. I do it in my personal life as well, by the way. I said, what do I want to achieve? What are my development areas based on what I know and based on, frankly, the feedback that I've gotten that I'm really going to listen to, maybe not in the moment, but I'll listen to. And if you do that and make plans and then think about the milestones, what are the, I'm going to sound businessy, Lubinish, but what are the metrics of success, right? What are those? When you don't make them, you should be honest and say, I didn't. Here's why. This is what I need to do. These are the lessons learned. And if you get in the habit, it's like muscle development, muscle memory of doing that. Again, not being too critical on yourself because, people make mistakes. I think you can mitigate the negative implications, but I think you also evolve, and this is kind of this continual improvement, a cycle. The worst thing you can do to improve is not admit that you need improvement. And anytime someone says to me, when I ask on an interview, so tell me about your challenges or what you do. When they say one of these two things, so don't say it on an interview, at least with me. One, they can't think about anything they have as develop me. That's a problem because we all do. Or they say something which is the classic answer, so don't give it. My biggest development need is I'm just a perfectionist. Don't say that. Don't give me those. That's people do. That's like the nice way to say I really don't. My problem is that I'm just too good. So I used to hear that a lot. I don't hear as much, but that's what people do. I think you just have to be candid with yourself. And when no one's around, because reputation is what people think you are, right? Reputation is what people think you are. Character is actually who you are. And if you frame that into, I can cover some of my mistakes, people don't know, and I kind of escape that one, you won't get better because you're not admitting and you're not learning from it. So that's why. Know that you're going to make mistakes. Be comfortable with making the mistakes, but not repeating them again and again, because that means you're not learning. And then you'll be better the next go round. Thanks for the question, Pablo.
Other questions? Gunther, I feel like I want to come work for you now, as along with everybody else on this call.
No.
Yeah. So Gunther, we have a few minutes left. I want to sort of give it to you to sort of have some last thoughts. But one of the things I just wanted to add was, I'm someone involved quite a bit in this whole sustainability ESG movement. It really sounds like American Express has been stakeholder oriented well before the big movement and the big brouhaha around sustainability. Is that fair? Is that a fair sort of?
It's fair. We built it's now a landmark building out in Arizona and in Florida 8 years ago that we won all kinds of LEED awards and it was, so we've done that before, was the thing to do, and before people really recognized more universally that we have a problem and we are here to take care and shepherd this planet so the next generation could enjoy it. So yes, and we've just about a month ago made a big proclamation with some of the commitments that we're having for emissions and sustainability across the board. So ESG is incredibly important to American Express and is part of now deeply embedded in our DNA.
Okay, I'll turn it back to you. Any last thoughts for the students?
Yeah, so thanks. Real quick, my last thoughts is, one, I enjoyed this. It is a kind of an interesting moment to go really 180 and come back around and come back to you all. And you should just know that I would have, when I was on that side of the flat screen, it wasn't a flat screen at the time, I would have not thought that I'd be given any words of experience and encouragement and anything, advice to anyone. And so you can do it. Again, my beginnings are incredibly humble, and I've had the opportunity to travel all corners of the earth, meet all kinds of amazing people in all stages of life, and have an impact to my community, my company, and individuals. And so I would ask you to set your ambitions high, be thoughtful, be planful, be encouraged, because you too can make all kinds of wonderful things happen. Again, in a broad sense, don't think about just money, think about everything. To give, make sure you realize fulfillment, but also have your part in bringing fulfillment to others. So thank you so much for the invitation. I really appreciate it, and I wish you all continued success academically and health in life. Be well.
Thank you.
On behalf of Pace University in Lubin, thank you very much. That was really an incredibly valuable and compelling conversation we had with you. We hope you could come back and join us again and do this again with us.
If Gary would have me, I will. No, we'll see.
We'd love to. We'd love to.
Bye-bye. Be well, everybody.